Hi, I'm Sedonia Sipes. I'm a pollination ecologist in the School of Biological Sciences at SIU. I'm an associate professor and I've been here over 20 years. I study bees, but one thing we don't pay much attention to in this lab is honeybees. We're interested in native bees. These are the bees that have co-evolved with plants, and for the most part, we don't know very much about them. Here we have 6 different species of bumblebees that are found in southern Illinois, or that we've found so far. It doesn't necessarily mean there aren't more out there still to discover. There's about 12 species or so in the state of Illinois, and bumblebees are, along with honeybees, are sort of unusual bees. People think of them as the typical bee, but the typical bee isn't social. They're solitary. Bumblebees are social. They live in colonies. These are workers and males, all of which visit flowers. So do the queens at certain times of the year. For the most part, the other bees in these boxes are either solitary bees, in which each female builds its own nest, or they have various levels of primitive sociality. These are some of the leafcutter bees in the genus Megachile, and they get their common name because the females cut little circular discs from plant leaves and use them to build their nests. They're also interesting because they're a member of a bee family in which females have the pollen collecting hairs on the underside of their abdomen instead of on their legs. And so you can see here, there's a female bee. She's got a sort of a yellow tummy, and that is a full load of pollen that she's collected. Well, we study more than just bees in the pollination ecology lab. What we're looking at here are some Surfeid flies, commonly known as hover flies, from southern Illinois, and a few of the lepidopterans from the area, some moths and butterflies. I have a graduate student who's looking at the lepidopteran diversity in the region, and I just had an undergraduate student do an incredibly thorough study of the Surfeid flies, and then he wrote and published a paper.
Insects are an incredibly important part of the ecosystem, especially pollinators, of course. We couldn't have flowers without them. And so it's scary to think that we don't know what's happening to insects across most of the US because they simply haven't been studied enough, and there's so many of them.
Jacob's work not only documented the species that are here, but it went a step further. He took each specimen, he examined each of them for the presence of pollen on their bodies. For the specimens that had pollen, he looked at where the pollen was located on the body and recorded quite a bit of detail on that. And then what it served as was a preliminary assessment of which Surfeid flies might be important pollinators to plants in the area that they visit. Another kind of information that you can get from entomological collections is sort of a snapshot of the plant-bee interaction. So I'm looking at a female bee here. It's one of the bright green sweat bees, and she has some pollen in the special pollen collecting hairs on her hind legs. And that pollen, particularly if the specimen was collected with a net and pinned up promptly, that pollen's going to stay on their body indefinitely. And so I have a number of studies going on in the lab where students are taking samples of that pollen. We have a pollen reference collection made from plants in the area. We're identifying where specific species of bees get their pollen. Pollinator conservation is a hot topic these days. Unfortunately, in a lot of areas, including southern Illinois, we don't know a lot about what pollinators live here. My lab undertook a pollinator inventory 4 years ago, and we've continued to work on it. And we're trying to collect pollinators from as many different plant species as possible across as many different ecological habitats as possible in the southern part of the state. In closing, I would just like to say that pollination is a critical process. If you're interested in conducting research on it, click the link below and drop me a line.